Welcome to the Happy Mindset, episode 122. Today's episode is called The Power of Illustration. So today I'm going to talk about the power of illustration. I'm not an illustrator, but as you will notice from my work, if you go to thehappymindset.com, I believe in the power of imagery and the power of bringing ideas to life. So that's why I work with Davey Villalobos. He helps me to bring my words to life in the form of imagery. They're very prevalent in my book. It helps to tell the story that I wanted to tell in a very concise way. That's what I like about imagery. So I suppose the first time I realized that imagery was powerful was when I was very, very young. I was drawn to watching cartoons. I was drawn to like Don Conroy as well. I remember watching him a lot, and I was just amazed at how he could draw things so quickly, and as well just the beautiful kind of imagery he had, the capability he had of actually doing that. I could see it was a skill. Not everybody could do that, and I really appreciated that when I was young. And I wanted to emulate that, so I actually drew quite a bit when I was younger, and I did want to be a cartoonist at one point. Didn't go down that path. I don't think it was actually the path for me to pursue, but when I did get this opportunity to work with Davey, I took it with both hands because I was like, this ties back to the initial dream I had of becoming a cartoonist when I was younger. So, the power of imagery. I'm just going to talk about this from the point of view of how it relates to the podcast, why it's important to me, and just for yourself as well. If you're somebody who's some way inclined to be an artist or a painter or somebody who wants to pursue something more meaningful, this episode might help you as well. So I suppose the biggest block I had around cartoons, animations, and illustrations was that as I grew older, I associated that as a very childish thing to like, to enjoy. A childish way of being. That's just the way I kind of grew up. That's the way I started seeing the world. And it led to me like suppressing that interest, suppressing that curiosity. Because the big thing for me with cartoons and animations when I was younger was that it made me imagine. It opened my mind up to a wider world. It showed me the power of imagination, the power of the mind. But as I got older, as I grew into, I grew into an adult, but an adult I'll say in quotation marks there, but I grew into an adult who disowned his imagination. Life just became duller. I wasn't curious about the world to the extent I used to be when I was younger. Anything didn't seem possible. I bought into a lot of rules, a lot of rigidity. It stunted my growth in so many different areas. And so the animations and illustrations, by bringing that back into my podcast, into my writing, that at a subconscious level is a signal as well for me to take myself more seriously, take my ideas more seriously, because that was the thing that I'd lost in the past too, was that I did have a passion for this stuff, this imagination and creation. I think writing was always the path I was going to follow. I don't think I was going to become an artist or a painter or anything like that. But I did, when I was younger too, I was interested in writing. I can remember especially spending a lot of time in actually perfecting like the calligraphy element of it, like the actual having nice looking writing. I liked that. I got a sense of pride from that I could write something that other people seemed to appreciate it, especially the adults could appreciate it. That's what would be considered to be beautiful writing, the actual, the way it looked. And I guess even when I was younger, I was ashamed about that after a while too, because I felt that was a very feminine thing to do, to actually take care in how you wrote what you were writing. So there were two aspects there. It was my interest in animations and my interest in beautiful writing that I became very ashamed and embarrassed about, and gradually over time I let them go. And I suppose since I wrote my book, since I got into personal development, since I created my podcast, I've been bringing in all those elements that I used to be ashamed of myself for having. And I've just seen the freedom that gives me then. Because as long as these things are suppressed and hidden, there's like a restriction within you to think about things. Your creativity reduces a lot. Your capacity to think outside the box reduces a lot. You become more of you've got more of a mentality of sticking to the group, blending in, rather than being an individual and inspiring other people and inspiring yourself to live a life that has meaning. I suppose the other thing with illustrations and animations and writing, it just makes this process normal as well. Because a lot of what I'm doing is tapping into a range of emotions, a range of different things that have just been in the shadows in my life. And I've realized by shining some bit of light in that through my words and then through imagery, that can help to lighten that. Because that can be very, very heavy when you're hiding stuff from other people, from yourself primarily. I guess this is what I've been learning. This is why it's been easier as well for me to be on this process of integration, I guess, integrating emotions. Is at the end of the day, it's the self-honesty piece that is key. And I never really got that when I was younger. I always thought honesty was about being seen as an honest person. And that's a recipe for disaster when you're thinking that that's what honesty is, because you'll never really be honest with yourself then. Because if you're trying to be, if you think that honesty is about how other people perceive you, then you'll only be honest about the things you think they're going to accept you for. But the self-honesty, the magic in that is that you're becoming more self-honest. You get a level of intelligence too around what you're sharing with people as well. That ties into the open book thing, which I struggled with for quite a while. I thought that, like, even when I was exploring more the shadow sides, even that word shadow side, it's not necessarily a bad thing. It's something that's unconscious in you that you've suppressed, denied, or disowned in yourself. It's a shadow side. So that could be as simple as when you're younger, you might have been shamed for being lazy. And as a result, you overcompensated. You're just always ambitious about stuff and you don't give yourself time to rest, which as an adult, that can start working against you. If you're not resting every now and again, you're not going to be able to keep that up and you're on a path to burnout. So initially something that you thought that kept you safe, it was a coping mechanism, that can burn you out in the long term. So the shadow side there, it's nothing extreme or dark or whatever. It's just something that's unconscious. It's just a lack of understanding of why you're always wanting to be ambitious and motivated to do stuff and you can't give yourself a break and just rest. So even when I was exploring these types of shadow sides and I was still struggling and grappling with this open book concept, it was difficult originally because I felt like whatever I learned about myself that was helpful, I would have to share that with everybody. But no, there's a nuance there. It's whatever you feel is worth sharing, whatever you feel will help other people, you can share. If there's something as well that you don't want to share, don't share it. That's what everybody's got that right, and everybody's got that level of, they can have self-respect as well. Another thing that I like about the imagery when it comes to social media. So when it comes to social media, the podcast, the book I wrote, and the blog has forced me to an extent to be on social media more often. What the imagery has done now, the illustrations, has helped me to have more of a realistic view on social media. So for example, with Instagram, I often hear people say that Instagram is toxic for people's mental health and well-being because we are painting a one-sided perspective. We're showing all the beautiful aspects of our life and we're not showing the reality of things. I've struggled with that. I think a lot of people will struggle with that because even if you go about trying to show the reality on Instagram, it's a very hard thing to do. Like, how are you going to show something that was genuinely devastating? How are you going to portray that on Instagram and stuff? So it's a difficult one. How I've navigated that now is through illustrations. By looking at my Instagram now, you can look at it and you realize immediately that this isn't real life. This is actually just drawings. There's drawings here. But the drawings were a reflection of real life. So there's all sorts of emotions, there's stories, there's words in there. This is what gives me a lot of satisfaction as well. It's the fact that because I'm putting time and energy into thinking about how I think about things, writing things down, I've put a lot of mental energy and effort into doing this over the years. And now I've got like visual representations in the drawings that give me a lot of joy when I see it. Even when I look at my room now as well, I started to put some of these podcast episode artwork and on my wall. I look at it and I think that would have never happened if I didn't take the time to contemplate things, to think about things, to write things out, to persist. So it took I was writing for a good 5 years, 2013 to about 2019. It was probably a good 6 years. I wasn't always very consistent, but I was writing for quite a bit of a period of time before I wrote the book, before I met Davey. So this is, well, it's all dependent on Davey as well here. Like Davey's the one the guy actually drawing the drawings. I'm very happy that he actually understands and he can relate to what I'm talking about. He understands what I'm trying to convey as well, like through this imagery and stuff. It's important to find somebody who is looking at that as well. Like it's not just anybody as well that can draw what you're saying. So that gives me a lot of joy in a way that I'm creating these narratives, I'm creating these storylines, I'm thinking about things, thinking about my life, thinking about how it can help, and this is all being represented through drawing. So that picture behind me, that book, those two images, they wouldn't exist if I didn't do all that, and it's a very visual representation for me. I guess when it comes to even self-education, if you're learning to code, what you'll find is that the more you can visualize it, the easier the process is. Like the hardest part with coding is actually visualizing what you're doing. Even with technology in general, visualizing what a network is. Because they're so abstract, when I find teachers who can actually help me to visualize what I'm learning, like I had a teacher before who did a video about databases and just did it in a simple Google Sheets. And that helped me to simplify what a database is. Because up until that point, I had no idea what a database was. It was very intimidating for me to even think about a database. But when somebody broke it down like in a simple manner, that this is a basic component of a database, this is what it looks like, that visual aspect then helps me to understand that I can learn this. It's not as complex as I think it is. So that's something that the imagery does as well. That's what I'm hoping anyway. That is making these ideas that I'm talking about more accessible to other people, because you can see it in an art form and you can see it in, just makes it a bit more normal for me anyway. And it also, just week to week, it gives me more of an internal motivation to do the episodes, that I can see an artwork at the end of each week. I don't know what it's going to look like. Davey's the one that's going to draw it. I'll look at it then, I'll be like, it's nice. Otherwise, I'd just be putting pictures of myself in every podcast episode, and I got sick of that. So the illustrations are a way to get around that. So the last two things I want to talk about when it comes to the power of illustration. The first thing is teamwork. So again, like I just mentioned there, Davey's the guy who's actually got the skill to do these drawings. Without him, they wouldn't exist. And what you'll find in your pet is that the more you start thinking for yourself, the more you have feelings of isolation and loneliness to actually deal with. So that's the trade-off. Like if you look at it objectively, like why would anybody be a group thinker when there's a lot of negatives to it? You're not living your own life. You don't think for yourself. But there are benefits to it. Nobody'd be doing it if there weren't. The biggest benefit that I had seen over the years, well, I guess I see in the contrast now, is that you've got a sense of belonging. Even if it's a false sense of belonging, it's a sense of belonging. And as humans, as people, we're wired to want to feel connected to other people, to want to feel like we belong. Back in the day, when we were on the savannas, that would have meant death for us if we were ostracized from a group. But even beyond that, it's like if you haven't got a life where you feel real connection to other people, it can lead to a lot of difficulties. Because I think as a society today, we take for granted the importance of feeling in general, feeling connected to ourselves, feeling connected to other people. When you haven't got a genuine sense of connection to yourself and to other people, then that can cause a lot of difficulties. And I think we just don't seem to address it too much because it's not a very tangible thing. It's very nuanced. It's invisible as well. Like, how do you even measure connection to yourself and other people? I guess it comes to that Einstein quote. I don't know whether this is a misattribution or not, but he did say that the things that we measure often don't count, and the things that we don't measure are the things that actually they do count. And that for me would be one of the things. It's the feeling connected to yourself, feeling connected to other people. But that is the trade-off. When you do start thinking more for yourself, you will go through periods of feeling isolated and alone. Even if there are people around you, if you're genuinely going on a path for thinking for yourself, trying to figure things out, then you can't do that by thinking exactly the same as other people. And when you start breaking away from that, that's when these feelings of, geez, I'm actually more alone than I thought I was. But the flip side of that is that you're starting to see the freedom inherent in that. That's the flip side, but you can't get to the other side until you go through the tough side of the actual loneliness and isolation. It's a continuous kind of thing that happens over time. You get more comfortable with that. I guess as well, the more you overcome that fear of loneliness as well, you become less desperate to just connect with anybody, and you start actually genuinely exploring what's real connection and what's a real relationship and stuff. But anyway, with the teamwork part here, I've got Davey, I've got people over the years I found that have made the process a bit more, I wouldn't say bearable, but it makes it better when you've got people to share this process with as well, and to co-create. That'd be the word for that. The last thing I want to talk about is that the subconscious mind thinks in pictures. So subconscious mind, it's a big topic. I'm not going to even pretend that I know everything about the subconscious mind, because I don't. It's even in the nature of it that you don't understand really the subconscious mind. I have learned a few principles that have helped, and one of the things is to understand the power of imagery, the power of painting a picture, and you can paint a picture with words. Like when a person's playing off of a crowd's emotion, they're painting some sort of picture there. There's some sort of imagery there that they're playing into, they're tapping into. Like otherwise, if somebody's just throwing a bunch of words at you, you can't actually visualize what they're saying. It's not going to have much of an impact. But if you can tie into something like their need or some sort of thing that they want, there'll generally be a picture there, even if the person isn't conscious of it, because it's a subconscious thing, because the subconscious thinks in pictures. And the first time I guess I started seeing this more on a practical level was just, 2 years ago? I was working with Maria McLaughlin on Disconnect, and Angela, what was the name of the profession again? Jesus. I should know this. What she was doing was she was drawing imagery. She was drawing a big picture of what we were talking about in the group, and at the end of it, then we could be talking about habits, maybe, for example, there 1 week, or talking about habits. The whole thing is catered around habits, and then she draws a picture around the whole conversation, image, illustration. Then at the end, she shows the illustration to the people, and so it serves, instead of minutes of a meeting that you can read out at the end of the meeting and nobody actually retains, the picture itself actually serves as a way to look at what was discussed in the meeting, because our subconscious mind will pick up on and remember an image much quicker than it will a bunch of words that have no real meaning or no real emotional connection there. It's like when you're looking at something that really moves you, artwork and stuff, like you can remember that again because there's an emotional connection there, rather than if I just put up a drawing behind me with one word in it. Unless that word resonates with you, it's not really going to have much of an impact. Not going to remember it. I think Angela's profession was graphic recorder, graphic harvesting, come to think of it. Did a little bit of a search there. That's the power of doing a pre-recorded episode. It annoyed me that I didn't remember exactly what the name was, but I'm pretty sure it was graphic harvester. That's what Angela was doing. If you want to look into that, it's quite an interesting thing. I know that there were companies doing that as well with the minutes of their meeting. Instead of having minutes of a meeting, they would do a drawing of the meeting for people to look at after the meeting, so they knew what they discussed and talked about, the important key points. I think that's why it was powerful, because in the imagery, especially if you get a good graphic harvester, they'll pick out the key things in the conversation, so that then you've got the key takeaways. Because a lot of our conversation, there's necessary minutia there, but it's minutia. So if you get somebody in the room who can pick up on the key things, so if you've got a meeting and one person, or the person comes away with one takeaway, one actionable takeaway that they implement, I would see that as a successful meeting with somebody, rather than just talking around in circles, talking a lot of words, talking a lot of stuff, and nothing ever actually changing or happening in your real world. That's something that I'm being more conscious of as well as I move forward, and it ties back to just taking myself a bit more seriously in the extent of being clear on what I want from my life. That's what I'm saying there with seriousness. It's not about me needing to be taken seriously with other people. It's more about just me taking myself seriously, taking my goals seriously, taking my vision for my world seriously. When it comes to the vision, it's like get clear on the few things that matter and just keep working towards it continuously. Because you'll reach stages as well, if you're going to do it for the long term. I'm going to talk about this in the next episode. Think long term. I've completely underestimated how short term I was thinking. And you get to see that over time as well. I think it's confusing because of the stories and the narratives that you see online of people being successful within a year, or within 6 months, or within 2 years. You never really hear an awful lot about somebody who wrote for 5 years, didn't make any money, wrote for another 5 years, then they started making some money. Or even somebody who's written for 10 years, didn't make any money, then they started making money. Like, those stories are more infrequent. Like even the KFC guy, Colonel Sanders, he didn't achieve success until he was an older man. He was well into his, 60s maybe? I don't know, but he achieved success well later on in life. So there's no definitive time frame on this other than thinking long term on this, making it into a lifestyle, getting clear on things. Like, I guess that's the way I'm thinking about things, is that what way do I want my day-to-day to unfold? And I make conscious decisions then around that. Like, for example, the imagery there in the back of on the wall there, that was a conscious decision. And that was a funny one because that came from, so me putting those 2 pieces of artwork on my wall behind me, that came from an initial vision I had of a house I would have one day, where I would start hanging pictures of my podcast in the house, around the house. Illustrations and stuff, because it'd be something that just kind of, when I thought about it, I'm like, I feel a sense of pride and accomplishment and happiness and achievement in that. And I just considered the other day, it actually came from Davey saying it, that he liked, I think, the book, me putting the book in the background. He suggested a poster. I looked into doing a poster before, but then I started thinking about, why don't I just hang the paintings in the wall that I imagine my future house would have? Why don't I just do that right now? It's not a huge thing, just look into it. So a lot of the times what will block us is that we've got this future vision in our mind of like, oh yeah, we'll be happy then. But we don't look into the practical stuff we can do right now that will actually create that right now. And that was a very simple thing for me to do. I'm already living in a room, just get 2 paintings and put them on behind me. Like, that's what the vision looked like. That's the starting point now as well. Like, that'll keep me moving in the right direction. Again, it comes back to the subconscious mind, just small shifts in your environment. It's priming your mind to focus on these things. I'm very conscious of that. I was very unconscious of that before. And you'll start seeing that, the power of that play out in years. So you might get to a stage, maybe 5 years on the line, you're like, how the hell did I get here? So you want to be doing that in a positive way by making small little changes in your environment that are going to head you in a direction in 5 years' time where you're like, Jesus, how did I get here, in a positive way, rather than having things in the background of your life that you aren't being conscious with, that are leading you in a direction of one day waking up and you're like, how the hell did I get here with my life, in a negative way. Even then, it's not all bad, because you can just start changing. You can start changing the small things that are putting you in the wrong direction towards a better direction. Talk about that in the next episode. I'll talk about the thinking in 5-year increments, how that's been playing out in my life. So that's it. Thanks again for listening, and I will speak to you on the next episode.